Welcome. Thank you so much for joining the 2020 Nevada Democratic Caucus Express training. This is such a crucial training for making sure that we have a successful caucus on Saturday the 22nd. So I'm going to start with a few housekeeping items here. So we have a ton of really important information to cover in a short period of time. So forgive me if we move a little quickly. We will make sure you have all the information you need though. So if we experience any technical difficulties during this training, just hang in there and we'll get right back to it. The language here is clear on purpose. You'll see me reading directly from the slides in a lot of cases, and that is intentional. If you've participated in a caucus in Nevada or another state, you may see familiar information, but there are many things that have changed since 2016 and other years, so there will be new information for everyone. You also may see some information repeated throughout, but that's because we really want to ease you into the process and make sure you're comfortable with all these different concepts. If you do have questions in any section, they will probably be answered in a later section, but if not, just make sure to drop your question into the chat box at any time, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. You can drop your questions in by hovering your mouse over the bottom of the screen, and the chat box should come up. And then please also, if you are joining us for the first time for this 12 o'clock session, please drop your first and last name and email into the chat box. And if you don't want everyone to see your message, you can use the drop down to send a private message to NVadmin, which is me, or NVDems, which is me. And if there are any questions we can't answer today, we will put you into the right point of contact for that. I also do want to take a quick second to say that all of our webinar trainings here are closed press. So thank you all for joining. Let's get started. First, we're going to run through several items here. So first, what is a caucus? What to expect at a caucus, rules for all of the sites, before, during, and after the caucus check-in process, how to register voters, steps and script, safety at caucus sites, and then our next stops on this express train here. So what is a caucus? The Nevada caucus is where voters get to make their choice for Democratic presidential nominee in 2020. It is also a community meeting where Nevada Democrats gather to conduct party business, such as running as a delegate or contributing to the county party platform. And Nevada is the first diverse state in the presidential nominating process and the only early battleground state. So all eyes on Nevada. We are very excited for this to finally almost be here. Our 2020 caucus will be the most accessible, expansive, and transparent caucus yet, and you will see those themes echoed throughout. I did forget to mention, my name is Cheyenne Davis, and I'm here in a volunteer capacity helping out the Nevada Dems as your trainer. Okay, so who can participate? In order to be eligible for the caucus, a voter must be a registered Democrat in Nevada and be 18 years of age or older by November 3rd, 2020. So we talked about expansive and accessible. These are some of the points we want to hit on that. So same-day voter registration, that is huge. 4-day early vote period that started on February 15th and concludes on Tuesday, February 18th. Multilingual voting options, traditional precinct caucuses held on February 22nd, as well as the Las Vegas Strip caucus sites for hospitality workers, also on the 22nd. And how you can participate, obviously volunteering, which you all are the best for doing that. But you can also early vote Saturday the 15th through Tuesday the 18th. You can do so in any early vote location in your county. You don't have to go to your specific precinct for that. On Saturday the 22nd, you would need to go to your specific precinct that you are registered to vote in. And all early vote and caucus day locations can be found on the website, and I am dropping that website in now. All right, so carrying on here, my apologies. So what to expect at a caucus? who will be there. Of course, our volunteers, all of you who are responsible for running the caucus, and the primary roles on caucus day are the site leads and the temporary precinct chairs. So some of you may be site leads and some of you may be precinct chairs, and I'll talk about what a temporary versus a permanent precinct chair is throughout this training. So the primary roles of a site lead, but of course we want everyone to be flexible. These are big events, and you know, we may have some additional responsibilities that pop up every now and then. But reporting your caucus site open and closed to the state party, coordinating setup and caucus registration, ensuring that each precinct room is set up prior to the caucus, managing issues as they arise at the caucus site and stepping in where needed, and then of course reporting serious issues to the state party. Filling the role of a temporary precinct chair, receiving completed caucus materials from each precinct, and returning all of those caucus materials and information to the state party, which is a huge part, which we will be diving into in great detail. Okay, so a temporary precinct chair. These are some of those roles. Again, these are the primary roles. Checking in caucus attendees and registering new voters, administering the procedural and logistical aspects of the precinct caucus, determining viability and counting each precinct presidential preference group, and then calculating the number of delegates to be awarded to each group. We'll definitely dive in on that. Taking Democratic Party platform suggestions from caucus attendees, reporting precinct caucus results to the Nevada State Democratic Party, and returning all necessary documents and materials to your site lead. The folks that'll be there, so we have our caucus goers, of course. Voters will caucus with other registered voters that live in their precinct. Members of the media may be in attendance. They cover the process, but press are prohibited from interfering with the process and interviewing participants during the event. We also may have presidential campaign volunteers and staff. It's common for them to be campaigning at caucus sites. However, volunteers and staff may attend on behalf of candidates, but must follow guidelines and not interfere with the process. We'll talk through what those rules are as well. And then our guests and observers, friends, family, out-of-town folks who just want to watch the process. These are some of the key caucus vocabulary terms. So you've probably heard some of these. Viability determines whether or not a candidate's preference group is eligible to be awarded delegates and is based on the total number of eligible caucus attendees who participate in the caucus. We then have the viability threshold. That is the percentage of voters, early voters and in-person participants combined, that a candidate needs in a precinct in order to be eligible to win delegates on caucus day. At most caucus locations, the viability percentage will be 15%. That is not absolute. You will have that information before you get started. And then we have our realignment, the term realignment, which is if a preference group does not meet the viability threshold, the participants of that group will realign to join another preference group if they would like. Okay, so let's do a sample scenario here. Let's imagine that a fictional caucus participant lives in the pretend precinct 401 in Boulder City. Their precinct has been assigned 2 delegates. That is a number that will be predetermined, and you will have that information in your packets. It is also, if you are interested in the logic behind it, the math, you can check it out on the website. They have a great breakdown for you. For precincts assigned 2 delegates, at least 25% of eligible caucus attendees must align with a candidate in order for a candidate to be viable. That's in the case of this size of a precinct. Eligible participants are made up of all early voters from the precinct plus all in-person participants with preference cards that are present on caucus day. So at pretend precinct 401, there were 100 eligible participants that caucused. We had 35 early vote participants, 65 in-person attendees, and 100 total eligible participants by adding those together. So then determining the math here for viability in each precinct, the permanent precinct chair will add the total number of in-person attendees to the total number of early vote participants from the precinct. And then it looks like this formula here. You do not have to memorize this. The reason we're going through it in detail is because we want you to be able to confidently describe it to someone if you get questions. It will be written down along with the logic behind it in your precinct guide, which I'll talk more about later. So the formula is early voters plus in-person attendees times the viability percentage for that precinct. So remember, for this precinct, it was 25% was that viability percentage. 35 early voters plus 65 in person times 25%. So that would equal 25 people that are needed in each preference group. So when determining viability, there are two rounding scenarios that I'm going to give you here. The first is for determining the viability. You must always round up because a person cannot be a decimal point, right? So if it is 25.25, it would be 26, if that makes sense. I want to take a step back for 1 second here and talk about that early vote piece, which we will talk more in depth on as well throughout the training. One is that you arrive at your early vote location in your county, any in your county. You check in and cast your presidential preference. You can register to vote or update your registration at your early vote site. And then you'll make multiple preference options in case your first choice isn't viable on caucus day. You'll list them 1 to whatever that number may be. Your vote is securely stored and will be counted with your precinct on caucus day. So it is counted with your fellow delegates to determine viability and award those delegates, with your fellow voters. So getting back to the math here, the viability threshold again is 25%. 25% of 100 equals 25 people. And let's pretend that this is the first alignment here. So candidate A received 20 people because they had 15 in person, 5 early vote. That would make candidate A non-viable because it is below 25 people. Candidate B received 50 votes, 50 people, 30 in person, 20 early vote. And candidate C, 30 people, 20 in person, and 10 early vote. Now, on the second realignment, because candidate A was not viable, the participants from that preference realigned to one of the other 2 candidates that were viable. So candidate A being non-viable, those delegates were offered the opportunity to listen to a 1-minute speech from each of the viable campaigns to see if they would want to join one of them. So candidate B now has 60 people because there are 37 in person and 23 early vote. We also calculate the early vote at this time. So it happens during the realignment, and your calculator will do that. We will talk about that in more detail. Candidate C received 40 people, 28 in person, and 12 early vote. So they are both viable there. And then once all the presidential preference groups are viable, the precinct chair will apply a delegate allocation formula. So this is the second of those formulas we talked about to determine how many delegates the group is awarded. So the formula goes as follows: number of people in the preference group times the number of delegates assigned to the precinct divided by the total number of eligible attendees. So in this scenario, candidate B receives 60 people of the preference group times 2, remember that was the number of delegates assigned to the precinct that was predetermined, divided by 100, which was the total number of people. That would equal 1.2. So in this case, so when we're talking about this formula, the delegate formula, it is 1.2. You will round down because the threshold there is 0.5. So 0.47, 0.48, 0.49, you would still round down. Anything 0.5 or above, you would round up. So you can see here candidate C received 0.8. We will round up, and in this scenario, both candidates would receive 1 delegate. Okay, so a couple pieces here on the election of the delegates to the county convention. So after delegates have been awarded to each viable preference group, the caucus will move to the election of delegates. Attendees can self-nominate and nominate others. Each candidate for a delegate position shall have up to 1 minute to make remarks. Precincts are entitled to elect half the number of alternates as they are allocated delegates. If a precinct is only allotted 1 delegate, 1 alternate shall still be elected. Anyone elected as a delegate or alternate must complete a delegate or alternate certificate form to ensure that participation at their county convention. And we'll look at what that looks like here shortly. Caucuses that elect more than 1 delegate should try to elect an equal number of men and women. For this purpose, it is appropriate to have more than 1 round of voting to elect all the delegates. Care should also be taken to encourage diversity among the candidates for delegate. And if the number of caucus attendees is less than or equal to the number of delegates allocated to a precinct, the permanent chair may entertain a motion to elect all attendees as delegates to the county convention by acclamation. And elected delegates and alternates will find out the delegate election certificate, or will fill out the delegate election certificate, and delegates will keep a personal copy, and the permanent chair will keep 1 copy to be returned to the state party and 1 copy to be returned to the county party, so 3 copies total. So next, we're going to dive into the rules. I know we kind of sped through the expectations there, but really we'll be talking through a lot of that here shortly. Rules for the caucus sites. So as a caucus day volunteer, you are an officer of the Democratic Party, and that means you'll be required to abide by a certain amount of rules here. So caucus volunteers are not permitted to give speeches on behalf of presidential candidates at the caucus during the realignment period. They should also not serve as a precinct captain on behalf of a presidential candidate. So what that means is anyone who volunteer, so maybe the presidential campaign called you to ask if you would serve as a precinct captain, that would be coming from them. This is through the Nevada Democratic Party, so that's a separate role, and you cannot be both, unfortunately. Caucus volunteers must remain neutral while performing their duties and are discouraged from wearing candidate merchandise or apparel. This also goes for the mannerisms of the day. You know, you may have friends on campaigns. Try not to be high-fiving or you know, talking in the corner or anything like that. The perception could be made that you were not neutral on this day, and on this day you are there as a neutral party. All caucus volunteers must sign a neutrality agreement, which I'm going to show you here. We're not going to dive into this right now, but essentially it just says that you are here in support of the process itself. You are helping to ensure that people have their voices heard. You are a huge, crucial part of this, which means that you are also responsible for making sure that the integrity of the event is maintained in and of itself. Really, the overall goal, we all have the same goal: electing a Democrat, beating Donald Trump. This is, you know, you are there to serve the process that will eventually lead to that goal. And on caucus day, you will receive a copy of that. You will sign it before you get started on caucus day. So the Nevada State Democratic Party is committed to running an expansive, accessible, and transparent caucus process. And so to ensure the integrity of the First and the West Caucus, campaigns and observers and guests must also follow a set of rules. So the following rules apply to the guests at all caucus sites. Guest is a general term. It would mean any press, any campaign officials, anyone there to just observe. Only eligible registered caucus participants may participate in the caucus. The site lead or temporary chair, all of you there, will ask that a guest observers, including campaign staff and volunteers, be seated in an area other than what is reserved for eligible caucus participants, if there is room. Caucus participants are given first priority for space in the precinct location. Guest observers must remain quiet and not become involved in the caucus discussion once the caucus is called to order. They will also be given an orange wristband at check-in, so you'll be able to identify them. Eligible caucus participants are to be considered actively participating in the caucus from the time it is convened until it is adjourned. It is not appropriate for a reporter to interview a caucus participant while it is in session. All facilities at the caucus have been reserved for caucus attendees and the Nevada State Democratic Party, which means that the site lead or temporary chairs, as officers of the party, have the first right to these facilities. In the event that there is broadcast equipment at a caucus site, it must be set up and used in a way that will not hinder or obstruct the participation of any caucus attendees. And in the event of violation of these rules, the site lead or temporary chair may ask the disruptive persons to leave. So you are empowered with that authority. Campaign staff and persons appearing on behalf of candidates in issues that are not specifically listed on the agenda or the presidential preference card will not be offered an opportunity to speak during the caucus. However, they may speak to individuals with attendees and pass out literature prior to the caucus being called to order at 12 o'clock p.m. So, you know, as people are coming and going, we can't stop them from that, and we, you know, want people to feel comfortable talking to them. In accordance with Nevada revised statute, soliciting signatures to any kind of petition is also prohibited. Presidential campaigns will be limited to 2 staff or volunteers at each caucus precinct location on February 22nd. Campaign staff and campaign volunteers who are observers will not be allowed to communicate, signal, or instruct the eligible caucus participants once the caucus is called to order by the temporary chair. Campaign staff and campaign volunteers will be given the opportunity to speak during the realignment period. We'll talk about those rules in a moment. Campaign signs are not allowed to be posted inside any caucus location or inside any property hosting a caucus location. And campaigns may not hand out stickers due to possible assessment of damage charges by facilities. Buttons, pins, and literature are acceptable to distribute outside of the caucus site prior to it being called to order. No campaigning activity by presidential campaigns is permitted inside the registration area of the precinct caucus, and paraphernalia that obstructs views, causes a distraction, such as something like a noisemaker, or interrupts the caucus are prohibited on caucus sites. Eligible caucus participants will be allowed to wear campaign gear in support of their candidate in their precinct caucus. So that, we can't tell people what to wear. It is only our volunteers that we ask not to wear specific candidate gear. Each campaign is responsible for the removal of any campaign materials they bring to the precinct caucus or provide to supporters at the conclusion of the caucus. We can't leave literature or signs hanging out. Campaign staff and campaign volunteers must respect precinct chairs and site leads at all times, including their personal space. Campaign staff and campaign volunteers may ask for information or clarification, but are not to crowd, harass, or make physical contact with the precinct chair for any reason. So this is there to safeguard all of you, of course. You are not to be made to feel uncomfortable, during this process. You are a volunteer, and they need to treat everyone with respect. So no outside food is permitted at caucus locations, and individuals may bring water, but campaigns are not to provide food or drink to caucus attendees once inside the caucus location. All guests, observers, and campaign staff or volunteers will be asked to identify themselves at check-in and wear an orange wristband throughout. Okay, so let's talk about some before, during, and after elements here. So things that will happen before the caucus. The site leads will receive their precinct materials and their caucus location information. We'll go through what those materials are. They'll also get their caucus materials pick up and drop off that will take place over this week here. So in the next few days, you should be getting information on that. We also ask that people take some time to drive to the caucus sites if you're able. It's just a best practice to kind of get your bearings and know where it's at. If you are not near your caucus site, that's okay, but it's just a way to get your bearings, and you don't need to do a tour of the site unless your site lead has set that up. Just drive there sometime beforehand if you can. So things that will happen continuing here before caucus day, we'll also have the opportunity to exchange contact info with other volunteers. So all caucus volunteers will exchange contact information. This may actually happen before it gets started that day, but something that will happen in the days leading up to the caucus is that site leads will call each volunteer assigned to their site to ensure they have all the information they need prior to caucus day. At that time, when they do give you a call, you will need to save their phone number in your phone so you have it. Okay, let's talk about these materials in a bit more depth here. So on top of every caucus box, you'll have the site information sheet. This will have, it's a cover sheet that will have specific information and instructions that are related to your site. And it'll also include instructions for where to set up check-in, which rooms to use, and information for your on-site points of contact. There'll also be some information on closing procedures and return of materials. So like I said, press, observers, campaign staff will wear orange wristbands, but you will wear volunteer credentials. So you will have a blue credential if you're a precinct chair and a red as a site lead. And for awareness, the site lead oversees all the precincts on site, so at the location. So for a precinct chair, your course of action, the site lead is your next person to talk to if you have any questions, and the site lead will escalate any questions or issues to the state party on your behalf. So we also have some directional materials. These we'll just use to make sure, if there's a long windy hallway that people can find the location. They'll have extra markers and paper in the box, but if you want to bring some too, that's great in case we need extra signs. But they will also be written in other languages to make sure it's accessible for everyone. Okay, so we also have some check-in and procedural signs here, as well as your precinct signs. These will go outside of the door of your precinct room, or perhaps, if you're in a big basketball court or something, it will go in the corner that your precinct is designated, but you will hang those up for folks to see. We also have voter registration applications. This is the federal form, and we're going to talk through that shortly. And then you'll also have the presidential preference cards. So these are essentially like a ballot for the caucus goers. The blue is side 1, so that's actually for your first alignment. So think blue is best, it goes first. And then red is the final alignment, so it'll be the back of it. And then we have the most important thing that you will have in your box there, which is the caucus guide and script. This will be available in every precinct and will have specific instructions for your precinct. So those numbers I talked about that are predetermined, all that good stuff will be in your caucus guide. It'll have your site lead information as well as a hotline that will only be provided to you. I will not be talking about the hotline too much because it will be given to you on the day of. That is just to keep it secure. This is the most important tool you have. So if you have like an extra clipboard at home that you might want to bring, this would be the thing that I would put right on top of that clipboard. And then the agenda, which just keeps you on track throughout the day. You can make sure that you're running on time and running on schedule. We're of course going to be flexible on caucus day, but this is generally what the timeline looks like. Then you'll have your math poster. We're going to dive more into the math poster later, but this is the one that you'll actually, you'll find a spot to hang this on the wall. There'll be some tape in the boxes for you, but if you want to bring some extra painter's tape, that never hurts. And it'll help perform essential caucus math formulas for you and be available for all the caucus attendees to reference. We're going to try and get you potentially one of these ahead of time so you can take a look at it in more depth. We also have the reporting sheet, which is the mini version of the math sheet, of the math poster, but this is the most important record for us. This is how we have a paper trail of what happens on caucus day. So this is your document that you keep safe the whole time. You know where it is, you have a hold of it. It will need to be filled out completely in every precinct. And at the end of the caucus, you will need to sign it and ask a member of each viable preference group to sign it. We'll talk more about that too. But just note that this document cannot leave your site, and it also cannot be taken home with you. It needs to be turned in right away. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We then have our precinct packets. So these are the different envelopes in which to collect certain materials. One that returns to the state party, one to the county party, and one is a contribution envelope for the Nevada State Democratic Party. These envelopes will be in there, and there will also be an outline of which materials go in which folders, so you don't have to memorize that. Then we have our resolution submission forms. So this is just, it's optional if someone has something they would like to contribute to the county party platform. This can be made available at registration at the check-in process, so that if folks have some downtime ahead of the caucus starting, they can write this up if they would like. Again, this is optional, but if someone has something they'd like to add, they can use this form to do so. We then have our delegate and alternate forms. So these will be in the precinct room with you. You'll get those out of the box and bring them with you. This is what the delegates and alternates must complete before you leave for the day. So everyone must have completed this or they will not be eligible to go to their county convention. So it's very important that these get filled out. We also have the County Central Committee nomination forms. So this can be at the check-in table for voters to join their County Central Committee. We'll have a ton of new energy, new people, new potential voters or volunteers. So we want to make sure that they have a process for signing up to get involved locally. And in Clark County specifically, we also have precinct captain and representative election forms. So those are available, and they will explain, they have an explainer on the form for folks interested in running for precinct captain or representative in Clark County. Okay, so let's go through kind of the timeline for the day. At 7:30, the site lead will arrive at the caucus location and ensure that the caucus location is one, open, and that all necessary rooms are accessible. You want to go around and make sure that if any of the entrances that may be points where folks would come in are open as well, and that there's nothing obstructing the path. At 7:40, the site lead will unpack their caucus box and organize materials and supplies to be distributed to temporary precinct chairs. And then site lead will complete the site opening checklist, which looks like this. Is the building unlocked, and have you made contact with the site point of contact? That would be the folks in the boiler room at headquarters, which you will have that contact information. Do you have the Nevada Dems point of contact saved in your phone in case it is needed? And have you identified where you will set up check-in area? So hopefully somewhere that is easy to find. At 8 a.m., all of the other volunteers will arrive, and they will need to check in right away with the site lead. Temporary precinct chairs will receive their precinct folder, and they'll proceed to their assigned precinct room to post any appropriate signage and ensure that the room is set up properly. Site lead begins setting up caucus check-in and registration areas while they do that. And at 8:10, the site leads will call and text any volunteers that have not yet arrived, and they will have a volunteer matrix in box 1 of their caucus supplies. And at 8:30, the site lead will report to the Nevada Dems that the site has been opened. That does not mean that that check-in has started, though. We'll get into that. At 8:35, all volunteers will work together to complete the setup process. So maybe if there's rooms that need more setup, or maybe if signs need to be hung, registration needs to be cleaned up, this is when everyone will be all hands on deck. At 9 o'clock, all the volunteers will meet at the check-in and the registration area. Site lead meets with their volunteer team to review the agenda and role assignments and any instructions for shutdown and cleanup post-caucus. And then they will complete a walkthrough of the check-in process with all the volunteers. At 9:40, all the volunteers should be in their assigned places at the registration area to prepare for the caucus site to open. Now at 10 o'clock, the location is open. If you're ready before that, you still need to wait until 10 o'clock. This is a set time period, 10 to noon. So at 10 o'clock, you can open the doors. The line may have already formed, which is great. That's enthusiasm in action. At 11:30, the site lead will assess the remaining line and, if possible, dismiss any temporary precinct chairs from the check-in area so that they can proceed to their assigned precinct rooms to prepare for the caucus to be called to order. If the line is long, however, they'll stay at registration a little while longer, but essentially they will be the first to go if needed. At noon, the site lead will identify and mark the last person in line. If there's extra hands for volunteers, you should have a volunteer stand at the end of the line so that they can let anyone who tries to join after the noon time period that registration is closed. We don't want to leave that to the voters. And you should tell that last person that they are the last person in line. So no person who gets in line after 12 p.m. will be allowed to participate in the caucus. Attendees who are in line at 12 p.m. will be allowed to finish the check-in, and then the caucus will commence as soon as check-in is fully completed. And the caucus cannot be called to order before 12 p.m. So even if there's no line and you're just kind of hanging out, 12 o'clock is when the caucus can be called to order officially. And after check-in and registration are complete, the temporary precinct chair will call the caucus to order. At around 12:10, it'll usually take a few minutes to get started here, but once the caucus has been called to order, the temporary precinct chair will do the following. They will hold the election of the permanent chair. They will announce the total early vote participants in the precinct, announce the viability threshold for the precinct caucus, conduct their presidential preference alignments, report results to the Nevada State Democratic Party, hold elections of delegates and alternates, and conduct other party business. So you can see that reporting comes before the election of the individuals, and we'll talk more about that. Around 1:30, the permanent precinct chair will follow instructions on the form collection checklist to return all materials and paperwork to the site lead, and the site lead will round up volunteers, and everyone will help complete the site shutdown checklist to return it to its former setup. And around 2, the site lead will report their site closed to the Nevada Dems. This timeline is, of course, a dream timeline. Some may run longer, some may run shorter. This is the ideal time frame, but I would not make any plans, any early dinner plans, just in case things go a little longer. So after the caucus, the precinct chairs will have reported the results and adjourn their caucus, and then they'll inform the site lead that their precinct is closed and return all the necessary materials. And they should make sure to do the following here. Double check that all caucus reporting sheets are accounted for. This is the primary written record of the caucus results and is so crucial that each one is returned to the Nevada State Democratic Party. Make sure that the name of the county and the precinct have been written on all the forms that require the information. Check all the forms for legibility and talk to anyone who may have written them up. Make sure you know who wrote them up to clarify if anything is not legible. And then complete and sign all forms where required. And ensure that the Nevada Dems contribution envelope is sealed and signed. We'll talk more about all of this. And the site lead will then return all the caucus materials to the Nevada State Democratic Party, either by taking them to the designated drop sites in Clark County or Washoe County. But your caucus packet will list the appropriate return method and address for your location on your site cover sheet. Never go home and try to mail it. We need these results ASAP. Like, this is the most important stuff that we need. So we will, there are people who are designated as runners that day that will come get it if absolutely necessary. If you're not able to get to the site, never stick them in the mail, because that means we have to wait several days. Okay, let's talk about the check-in process. For many of you, I'm sure you've been a part of a check-in process before if you've been volunteering for a while, and this can sometimes create a log jam, so we want to make sure it runs smoothly. Caucus participants may begin check-in at 10 a.m. and check-in ends promptly at 12 noon. Those in line by noon can participate. Then caucus participants receive preference cards and directions to their precinct area, and the site lead closes check-in the table after the last person who was in line at 12 p.m. has been checked in. We are going to dive into that more here. So during the check-in process, someone walks up to the table. You're going to look up the caucus participant to confirm they're registered to vote, so ask them what their full name is. Then find their name on the paper voter roll, which will be alphabetical by last name. If they're found, ask their date of birth and address to confirm it's the right person. And if the caucus participant isn't in the voter roll or their address is out of date, they will need to fill out a voter registration form, either online or paper. We'll talk through that process as well. Then you would, if they are on the rolls, you would confirm that they did not participate in the early vote process. So there will be a second list that once you have their name identified, you will go to that list and you will look them up to make sure that they didn't early vote. There will be a second printed list for you. And then if they did not early vote, you will check them in by putting their first pin sticker. This is just a sticker with some numbers on it next to their name on the voter roll, and have them initial next to the pin sticker. And then the other pin sticker, so there's a second pin sticker that matches it. You're going to stick that on their presidential preference card and write their precinct number on the card, which will be on their check-in list there. You will see that information at the top, so you can you will be able to tell where that information goes. And then you will give them their card and a pin. So, and then you'll direct them to wait in their assigned precinct room for the caucus to be called to order, and the room assignments, you'll have a sheet of that information. Try and get people to go to their caucus rooms. They might want to hang out and see all the fun, and but you might develop some crowds in the registration area, and that is really where the log jams can start, because it causes confusion. So if you need to make an announcement, just say, hi folks, can we please head to our caucus room so we can make sure we get started on time. While they wait, they can also get a form to submit a resolution to the county party platform or nominate themselves to the county party central committee. You saw that information that can be off to the side, and just let them know to read through those documents if they're interested. And then if they are not on the voter roll, so that's okay. If a caucus participant isn't on the voter roll, it's probably because they either weren't registered as of January 15th, 2020, maybe they weren't registered as a Democrat yet, or maybe they are on the voter roll but their address is not current. So they can still register to vote same day and participate in the caucus. So what you'll do is when you set up the check-in area, you will have a few tables where general check-in will be, and then off to the side you'll have another table for voter registration where folks can line up there. If they come to you and find that they are not registered properly or not on the rolls, you will send them over to the voter registration table. You should have a few volunteers there with a couple iPads that have the information pulled up. So direct them over to the registration area and have them complete the online application, or give them a voter registration form. You will need to tell them that they do have to select Democrat as their party, but they will not need to show ID, and I'm going to go through that process in a little bit here. So once they have registered, you're going to have them sign in on a paper sign-in sheet because we still want a log of that. You're going to still put their first pin sticker next to their name and have them initial that pin sticker. And then you will put their second pin sticker on their presidential preference card. You're going to also need to look them up on the Nevada Dems lookup tool on caucus.nvdems.com. I'm going to drop that in again to the sheet here, to the chat box here, because that is actually, you want to, I would bookmark it on your phone if you can, because it is just going to be a really important document there. So, or resource for you. So you're going to look them up on the NVDems lookup tool and find their precinct. So you'll write their precinct number on the card and then give them their card and a pin. But if the lookup tool doesn't work, we also have a backup. You can reference your paper precinct map. So you'll have some maps of the precinct at the voter registration area. You're going to have them point where they live, and then it will be identified. There will be a boundary drawn of where each precinct is. So they'll find where they live. And then you'll direct them to wait in their assigned room just like everybody else. Okay, let's talk about registering some voters, which is my favorite activity. So we do not need to ID any voters at any caucus location. So when registering a voter, they do not need to provide their ID or proof of their identity to you as a volunteer. In order to register online using the Secretary of State's website, they will have to have their Nevada issued ID, but they do not need to provide it to the volunteer in order to register. And if a voter does not have a Nevada state issued ID, or if they don't know their ID number, they can still register using the paper voter registration form as long as they know the last 4 digits of their social security number. And maybe if they're like a young person who doesn't have that memorized yet, you can have them step to the side and call a family member or guardian to find that information. So when registering voters same day, the first course of action, if they have that Nevada state issued ID, is to use the nvsos.gov website. You'll be able to pull that up on the iPads. You should have that ready to go on those iPads at the voter registration area. And they will go through the process of filling out that form, which we'll talk through. If they do not have the Nevada state issued ID, they can use a federal voter registration form to register. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through this here because it's online. They'll be able to read it and follow along. They'll have to read through some information and hit continue. They will have to acknowledge that they read the legal notice and then hit continue. And then once they get to this page, they will also need to read a few prompts here and check mark the boxes. If they don't check mark the appropriate boxes, they will be listed as ineligible. So just make sure that they're reading through it thoroughly. And then they'll get to the page where they fill out their information. This will be self-explanatory as well. On this page, they will check mark that they are not a robot, and then they will hit continue. And on this page, it will alert you if they are already a registered voter, so that they can update their address or their party affiliation, because again, they wouldn't be over there registering if they had that information accurate. On this page, they will confirm their information, and they will need to do an electronic signature. This is important. If it is an electronic signature, do not let them just scribble without, paying close attention and making sure it matches their real signature. We just want to make sure it's as accurate as possible, so have them slow down and do it correctly. And then you'll click the complete button at the bottom, and you will be all set on the online process. One thing I want to note, and this holds true for any voter registration procedure, is people will be excited. They will want to talk to you about, how excited they are for the day or the weather or whatever it may be. But please, when they're filling out their forms, either online or in person, they need to pay attention to the form. So redirect the conversation back to the form, maybe even stand next to them, peek over their shoulder while they fill it out, and always double check it before you let them walk away. So this is the federal voter registration application, which can be used again if they do not have a Nevada state issued ID. The form in more depth here, one of the big pieces, the top part, they do need to check mark those boxes. Some people overlook that top part, so make sure that you're telling them to read that information and check mark the boxes. Then they will need to fill out their name information. If you have a young person, sometimes they do confuse junior and senior as their grade, so make sure that you're relating it to their name for them. And then let's see here, the address you will on line 2. If they get their mail at the same address, they do not need to fill out line 3. On line 4, though, is date of birth, not the date. So make sure that they are putting their actual date of birth. That's a big deal there. And then you can move to the ID number on 6. That would be the last 4 of their social. Always double check that their handwriting is legible as you're going through this too. On the bottom half of the form, they will have to choose party. They will have to put Democrat in order to participate in the caucus on Section 7 there. Section 8 is not required in the state of Nevada. If they fill it out, it's not a problem, but save them some time and tell them they don't have to fill it out. And then Section 9 is, of course, the important part of their signature. Make sure they're writing their signature and today's date. So for the purposes of the caucus, it will be 2/22/20. Okay. Oh, this is the fun part. Caucus steps and scripts. So what we're going to do here is walk through the script that you will use for the day of the caucus. The script is extremely crucial, and we'll dive into that. I'm going to start with some of the early setup pieces here, and you'll see these step 1 through I think it's 15, and we will go through them in more depth. So step 1 is to set up your space. The precincts are in separate rooms or separate areas of a large space. So what you'll need to do is move any furniture that's not needed out of the way, but make sure that you have some chairs for anyone with disabilities or that cannot stand for long periods of time. And then designate an area for observers off to the side. Then you'll put up your precinct sign, your Caucus 101 poster, and your math poster. You can use that painter's tape to do so. And then you'll set out a clock or a timer. Most people just use their phone. There won't be one in the box, so a lot of people will just use their phone. And then you will open the caucus calculator on your iPad. So here's what that math poster looks like. So you're going to fill in steps 1 through 2 in the box at the top there with your caucus site name, the precinct number, and then the number of delegates to elect to that precinct, which again, you'll have that information in your caucus guide. You're also going to add that number, that same number, to the delegates math box below. So add your number of delegates to elect down at the bottom there where you can see it in red. It's the same number. And then you will unlock your iPad. You'll open the iPad case, hold the iPad horizontally, press the small round home button on the side of the screen twice, and this will bring your iPad to the home screen. And then you will log in using the Caucus calculator. So you're going to tap the icon in the top left corner called Caucus Calculator. It'll be the only thing on there. And this will open the Caucus Calculator website. Then you will enter your precinct number and then a secret passphrase that's found on the inside of your precinct folder. So you'll have your folder, you'll look inside there, and that's where the passphrase will be. And if you enter the wrong info, it's okay, you will be able to try again. And once you're logged in, your iPad is ready for Caucus. But please note the next page you see will be step 3, so don't be alarmed that where's step 1 and 2. You already did step 1 and 2 because those were actually the setup process. And then step 2 is calling the caucus to order. So you're going to begin the caucus after 12 p.m. and after every caucus goer who is in line by that time has completed check-in. As a reminder, anyone not in line by 12 p.m. will be unable to participate. So we're going to start running through the script here, which I'm going to read word for word. It will be provided, it will be in your packet of information. We're also going to try and get you a copy ahead of time. But if you're a temporary precinct chair, the caucus script is the most important tool that you have for running a successful caucus. So you should follow the script word for word and ensure that you don't skip anything, and that you're following the process as designated. The script will also include important notes that instruct you when and how to deliver the information. And the text in bold is to be read aloud. Other text is just for your reference. So it kind of looks like you'll be able to tell which parts are the things you say, and then the other parts are the things you do. So this is the first part of the script here, calling your caucus to order. So you're going to say, welcome, my name is Cheyenne, and I'm the temporary chair for this precinct. I was recruited, trained, and certified by the Nevada State Democratic Party to run this precinct caucus. This is precinct number blank, and we have the number of delegates to elect today. You'll say that number. At this time, I would like to call the caucus to order. This is a neighborhood meeting, and the primary purpose of the caucus is for Democrats from our neighborhood to get together to voice our preference for whom we would like to be the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee. This is a grassroots process that affords all of us an equal opportunity to participate and have our voices heard. In order to have a positive and fair process, we must simultaneously support our preferred candidate with enthusiasm and treat each other with kindness and respect. At this point, you'll say, please say yes if you will commit to contributing to a fair and positive caucus today by treating every person in the room with kindness and respect. So you'll ask them to say yes. This really is helpful for you as well as a safeguard to remind people that, you agreed to be fair and kind today, to treat one another with respect. As Democrats, those are our values. We want to live our values. We all have the same goal at the end of the day. So if someone gets out of line by any means, they're very passionate about this day, the events of the day. So remind them that they agreed to a fair and respectful process. And this is the part, I'm just kind of reiterating this part here so you can read through it. It really is a safeguard that we hope you take advantage of. Okay, so then you will say the caucuses are a grassroots election process paid for by the Nevada State Democratic Party. The party incurs expenses such as space, equipment, rentals, printing of caucus materials, and hiring staff in order to run a successful caucus. We are suggesting a $20 donation for 2020. Any donation you can make today is greatly appreciated. However, it is not mandatory in order to participate. You'll want to make sure you say that. As someone who used to run a state party myself, I do know it is a huge cost. And in a year when we are supposed to be dedicating our time to electing Democrats up and down the ballot, so this request really helps to ensure that we are able to do those crucial campaign activities for the rest of the year, right? Little asks like this will make sure that we have the funds to do our ultimate goal, which is to elect Democrats, right? So at this point, I will pass around a donation envelope for the Nevada State Democratic Party for anyone who would like to donate. And then you'll circulate the contribution envelope provided to you. And at the end, you'll seal and sign the envelope and give it to your site lead. While the envelope makes its way around the room, I will read selected letters from elected officials. So some elected officials have put together some notes that help to kind of fire up the crowd, get them excited, remind them the importance of what they're doing and the importance of giving and donating their time to the party. So some of the elected officials you can see here. However, if you are running behind schedule, you can skip the reading of the letters. This is just something to do if it's taking a while for the items to get around the room. Once the envelope is back to you, you can proceed with the rest of the process here. So now is the time to elect the permanent chair. Now we talked about a temporary chair, which is you currently, and this has to happen before any official business is conducted. So you will say, before any official business is conducted at this caucus, the caucus as a whole must elect a permanent precinct chair. I am the temporary precinct chair for this precinct. As I mentioned before, I was recruited, trained, and certified by the Nevada State Democratic Party to run this caucus. I have also signed a neutrality pledge agreeing to run this caucus without bias towards any specific candidate. I would like to nominate myself as permanent precinct chair. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of electing me as permanent precinct chair, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, please say nay. So you will give the opportunity for someone to run. We know that you went through this process and you're dedicating your time to this, and hopefully the folks will recognize this. However, it is a community meeting and we want people to feel like they're included as well. So if someone does a run against you and they do happen to win, we do ask that you help them run the caucus. We don't expect that that will happen very much, but you never know. And at this point, you may also want to appoint a caucus secretary if you would like. This is not mandatory at all, but if you do choose to appoint a secretary, use the language, at this time, I would like to appoint blank as the caucus secretary. A secretary can help with many things, and it's just kind of an official person to help you carry the iPad or write the math down on the math sheet, or take time for you because there's a lot of timing going on. So it might be a good idea to talk to some folks ahead of time and say, is anyone interested in being the secretary? You will then read the non-discrimination policy. Now that we know the number needed for viability, it's time to join our presidential preference groups. Before we start, I would like to read the following statement banning discrimination in our caucus process. All public meetings at all levels of the Democratic Party in Nevada shall be open to all members of the Democratic Party, regardless of race, age, color, creed, national origin, religion, ethnic identity, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, economic status, philosophical persuasion, or physical disability. This is just a reminder that we live our values as Democrats, and we're doing so in this process. Next, I will count the number of caucus participants. So if you are an observer, please go to the observer area. Small children may stay with their parents. All participants, please hold up your preference card high. I will walk around and count each person. Once you have been counted, please put your hand down. And of course, in this case, you would not count the children because they can't vote, but they can stay close to their parents if they need to. Only count eligible caucus participants, and that should be those who have a presidential preference card. Observers will also be identified because they have that orange wristband, and then count participants out loud so that everyone can hear you. The total number of in-person participants for this precinct is blank. Can we all agree that there are blank caucus participants here? Then you'll first record the number on the caucus math poster and then record it into the caucus calculator and proceed to the next step. And now I'm going to show you what that looks like actually. But one thing to remember here is that however you think is most efficient to do this counting process, you should always count out loud for transparency, of course, but maybe you can even ask people to line up, to group into groups of 5 or 10 or something that can help you, but you will need to count everyone and then have them put their hands down once they have been counted. And then you will you will record that information. So you can see here what it will look like. The count will go on step 3 at the top, and then you will also put it into the calculator on your iPad. And then this year, for the first time, we offered Nevadans the chance to participate in our caucus over 4 days in advance of our caucus day. Those participants' preferences will be included in our caucus here today. Then you'll look at the number of early votes participants on the calculator. It'll be ready for you there. and record the number of early voters on the caucus math poster. So I can now report that there were blank early voters in our precinct. The total number of caucus participants in this precinct is, and that will be the addition of the early vote plus in-person folks. So you will announce that as well. I will tell you on these iPads here, I just did a back button to show you this. There will be a little page that looks like a link. You'll just click the link to move to the next page after you hit submit. And then you will view the early vote first alignment results. This is the representation of what we just talked about here on the early vote piece. So it will be listed on the iPad, and you'll be able to record it right there on the count. And then it will also calculate the total for you, but you're welcome to pull out your phone and calculate it as well, just to double check, or do that math in your head if you would like. But you will then record it on step 3 and announce it. Okay. In this next part, I'll be calculating our viability number for our caucus. The viability number is the minimum number of people who need to align with a candidate for that candidate to be awarded at least 1 delegate. The count of people will include both people in person here today and people who voted early. For example, in the next step, you will be forming groups to show your preference for the candidates. If our viability number was 20, but there's a candidate preference group with only 19 people, that candidate would not be viable. The viability number is based on the number of delegates allotted to our precinct and the total number of in-person and early voting participants. If the calculation results in a decimal number, we will round up. So this is the part where we round up no matter what. The other piece, which I'll go over in a minute, is where we round to the 0.5. I will now use the formula on the math poster to calculate our viability number. You'll complete the math poster section for the viability number, and then on the calculator, advance to step 4. On that screen, you'll confirm that the viability number on the math poster matches. So you'll say the viability number for our precinct is blank. And as a reminder, once you form candidate preference groups, you must have at least blank people in the group, including early voters, for that candidate to be viable. Complete the viability calculation section on the math poster. So this is what we just talked about here, so you can see it. You will do step 4 there. And what you probably can't see here is on the top line, it says if electing 6 or more delegates, and then it says if electing like 5 delegates or something. It will tell you, I can't read it because it's a little small there, but you will see it on there, and you will use the appropriate line of these 3 lines in order to calculate it. However, your calculator is also doing the math for you, so it's really there so you can double check your work. And this is what it will look like on your iPad. Now, we're now ready to move into candidate preference groups. We will align ourselves in this room first and then align our early voters. Here's how this will work. You will move to the preference group of your choice. If you need help, I can direct you in finding the group you're looking for. You should organize alphabetically by the last name of your candidate. So going around the room, essentially, you would go by each candidate's name and hopefully get them alphabetized around the room, but however you can do it most efficiently and effectively. And then you would say, please organize yourselves. You will have 15 minutes to align with your candidate group. When you're ready, fill out the blue side of your presidential preference card, and we will share early vote first alignment results after we finish this step. Make sure you're starting the time then and concluding after 15 minutes. So you'll say this, okay, if you're ready, the 15 minutes starts now. Take note of the time or set an alarm so you can track the 15 minutes. I would recommend doing a stopwatch on your phone. Watch the time, and when the 15 minutes is up, or if they are done early, you can say, is everyone done and ready to move on? And then you will go about counting each group. I will now count and record the number of caucus participants in each group. On the calculator, you're going to click next to advance to step 5, and then say, when I come to your group, please hold up your preference card high. Once you've been counted, please put your hand down. Remember that you should count them out loud so that participants can hear you, and then record the results for each preference group on the math poster. enter the results for each preference group's alignment into the caucus calculator, and then on the following screen, you'll review the results on the caucus calculator. So you'll enter it, and then it'll look like the same table. It'll show you it again just to confirm it on your calculator. And when I say calculator, I'm using it interchangeably with iPad. One thing to note, a lot of people ask what the best process for this is. Whatever you think is most efficient and effective for your group. You know, they say, should I go to each candidate group and then go back to the math calculator and then go to the next one and go back to the math calculator? If that's how you think it is most effective, that is fine. Or you can go through the line. There's no set guidelines on this because we realize not every situation is the same. Just make sure that you are getting those actual numbers. And at this point too, you may also say something like, does anyone know that anyone is in the bathroom, or something like that, so you can make sure that if somebody ran to the restroom that you are still counting correctly. This is just what that looks like here. So you record it on the math poster, you match it to the candidate's name and the number that you counted, and you will also do the same thing on the calculator here. You'll go through each person, it's listed alphabetically, and you will just put in that information, the number that you counted. Then you will announce the results for each group. So the blank candidate group has this number of in-person caucus participants. After reviewing the in-person first alignment counts, you'll click next on the calculator to see the early vote first alignment results. And you're going to write those results on the math poster and announce those early vote results for each group. It will be in there for you. The group for this candidate has this many first choice early votes, because on the first alignment, it always goes with the first choice of that candidate, of that early voter. And at this step, you will record the viability results. So on the calculator, you're going to hit next to advance to step 7 and use the results shown on the calculator. Then you're going to record what you see on the calculator on your math poster for which candidate group is or is not viable. So it'll tell you, I think it like turns green if it is viable, but it will tell you, and you will double check that it is above that viability number that you've predetermined. And then you will write that information in. You can see the early vote part, you would write that in. This is something of what it would look like on your calculator, and you can just write those in on that middle column there. Then you will say, as a reminder, each group must have at least blank people in the group, including early voters, for that candidate to be viable. The blank candidate group has this many in-person caucus participants plus this many early votes where this candidate was the first choice. This gives them a total of blank caucus participants. And then you will say this group is or is not viable if it is above or below that threshold. And then you will enter the total first alignment participants on your math poster and indicate which preference groups were viable and which were not. So you can see you just go through the process and you fill out the form, and it'll kind of walk you through on the math poster, and it will produce the results for you on the sheet here, on the calculator. And then you will collect the preference cards from all the viable groups. So if all groups are viable, lucky you, that's a quick process for you. Because all of our groups were viable, we're ready to move on to award delegates, but first I need to collect all of your presidential preference cards. Your caucus calculator should confirm that all your groups were viable, and then you collect completed preference cards for all participants and go to step 10 on page 27 of your caucus guide. You'll just be scrolling through this guide, so you will not, it will be the script and you'll be following along with it, so you don't need to remember that page number. However, if at least one group was not viable, one or more, because we had one or more groups that were not viable, we will do a final round of alignment. This final alignment will only apply to the people in the non-viable groups, both in-person and early voters. Please hold on to your preference cards. So those folks that did receive or were aligned, you would take were aligned to a viable candidate, you would take their preference cards. For the remainder of the people who were aligned with a candidate that was not viable, at this point, you'll be addressing them. So for the people in viable groups, please stay where you are and I will come to collect your preference cards. Or if you are in a viable group, you may not realign. So keep in mind that they will need to stay with the candidate that they chose. And then you will collect preference cards from viable groups only and move on to step 9 here. So to help the people in the non-viable groups decide if and which group they want to move to, a representative of each group, both viable and non-viable, will have 1 minute to give a speech. We will go in alphabetical order by the candidate's last name. Now, I get a lot of questions about the viable and non-viable piece here. That's because, let's say there were 3 groups that were not viable. So all 3 of those groups will also get to give a 1 minute speech to see if any of those the 2 other groups would like to join them, right? The 2 that were not viable as well. So call on each group in alphabetical order and time the speeches for 1 minute. So they need to find a representative who would like to passionately speak for their candidate for less than 1 minute, and you'll need to time it. Thank you for your remarks. At this time, we will proceed to the final alignment. Okay, the people in the non-viable groups have 15 minutes to join a viable group or form a viable group. If you remain in a non-viable group, your group will not be awarded any delegates. The time starts now. So take note of the time or set an alarm so you can track those 15 minutes and make sure when the 15 minutes is up, you say, is everyone done and ready to move on? Once you have aligned with your new preference group, you will fill out the red side of your preference card, the back side. And then on the calculator, you're going to hit next to advance to step 9. Go to each group and count the number of final alignment in-person participants. And when you're recording the final in-person participants, count for each preference in-person group and make sure that the final count for that group is equal to the initial in-person participant count, plus any newly aligned participants. You can check this by referring to the number of preference cards collected for each candidate preference group. So you're going to record results in the math poster and in your caucus calculator, and in the calculator, you'll then be able to confirm the results you've entered. I will now count and record the total number of participants in each group. When I come to your group, for those of you who have just realigned, please hold up your preference card high and I will collect your preference cards. Once you've been counted, please put your hand down. And then you'll say the blank candidate group has this number of in-person caucus participants. And this is what it looks like on the final alignment here. What we've been talking about, so steps 9 through 11 start here, and this is what it will look like on the iPad as well. Note, on the calculator, you're going to click next to advance to step 10 to see early vote final alignment results. The calculator will automatically realign any early voters necessary. Write the results for the calculator on the math poster. So the blank candidate group has this number of early votes in the final alignment. If you haven't already, collect the preference cards for remaining participants. And it says repeat there, that means do this for each of the candidate groups. And then you'll say, please stay where you are and I will come to collect your preference cards. And this is what that looks like. So enter in the final alignment results on your math poster and on the calculator. One thing I want to clarify here, some people ask about the early math part or the early vote math. So you will have a backup. The calculator will be automatically calculating it for you. But if for any reason you're having trouble with the iPad, the backup, there will be a paper backup with instructions on how to do so. We're going to also try and send you a video of how that works later this week, so keep an eye out for that. But to think of it this way, imagine a list from ranked 1 to 5. The voter for the early vote would have cast, 1 through 5, their theoretical preferences, candidate A, B, C, D, down the list 1 through 5. And then in the first round, all of the people their votes will be cast for their first candidate. However, on the second realignment, if their first choice was not viable and neither was maybe their second choice or even their third choice, then the next one down that is viable is where their vote is cast. So maybe candidate A, B, and C were not viable, but candidate D was viable. At that point, candidate D would be their preferred choice, and that would be where their vote went. Okay, so then you will record the final alignment viability results, and on the poster for each candidate group, record if they are or are not viable. Then you're going to review and compare the viability results with the results on the caucus calculator and announce the final alignment viability results for each group. So you can say, as a reminder, each group must have at least this number of people in the group, including early voters, for that candidate to be viable. Blank candidate group has this many in-person caucus participants plus this many early votes. This gives them a total of this many. So then you would say this group is or is not viable according to if that meets the threshold. And you would do that for each one. This is just, again, a visual representation of what that looks like on the two documents. Now we will calculate and award our delegates. So you'll say, now I will calculate how many delegates will be awarded to each viable preference group. And you will want to say this. This part requires me to do some math and record results and may take me a few minutes. I will share the results when I'm done. So you will do this on the poster, but you can also double check your work on the calculator. So in the delegate math portion of the poster, complete the math formula. In the first column of the delegate math section, write the name of all viable groups and only write in the viable groups, right? Because that is who is left. Copy each group's final alignment numbers from above and multiply by the number of delegates you'll be electing. Then you're going to divide this by the total caucus participants. Remember, we went over that formula and you will have it in front of you as well. If the delegate math results in an exact decimal tie, you would need to break the tie with a deck of cards. There is instructions on how to do that in your packets. And then you will record any tie breaks on the math poster along with who received the additional delegate. And in some cases, that really will just mean keeping a delegate rather than adding a delegate. So it depends on the scenario. On the calculator, you're going to click Next to advance to step 13 and check that the delegate results on your math poster match those in the calculator. And you'll say, now that I have the results, I will announce and award the delegates for each viable preference group. I will walk you through the math as I give results. The precinct is awarding this many delegates to our county convention. That's the total. The total number of in-person and early voting participants is this. I have multiplied the total number of members in each precinct or preference group by the number of delegates our precinct is electing and divided by the total number of eligible caucus participants. So total number of in-person participants plus total number of early voters, and then divided by that total number of eligible caucus participants. And then you will say, this result gave us a decimal number, which will be rounded to determine the final number of the delegates. So at this point, I want to be very clear. The number that you see, so let's give a scenario here that the number was 2.65. We will have rounded that above, because it was above 0.5, that candidate would have received 3 delegates. So 2.65 would be rounded to 3 because a person cannot be a decimal. However, if there is a leftover candidate or leftover delegate after you do this math, there's still one left over, which happens occasionally, you will award that delegate to the next one, so the highest one that was under 0.5, so they were not already rounded up. So if the scenario was the 2.65, which is the one you rounded up to 3, and then the other 2 options were 2.12 and 2.42, you would give it to 2.42 because they were the next highest that had not already been rounded. Okay, and then you would say the number of delegates awarded to each viable preference group is blank, and that equals this many. Okay, and this is what it looks like here. It's the bottom part, so you're just kind of moving through the sheet. And at the bottom, you do that delegate math, and the math will be spelled out there, but it will also calculate for you on the calculator, so on your iPad. Now you're going to fill in your caucus reporting sheet. So after you've announced all of that, you will remember the mini sheet we talked about that matches your math poster. You're going to fill that in its entirety by copying the results from the math poster onto the caucus reporting sheet. And then you're going to invite representatives from each viable candidate group to sign that reporting sheet. So they will have to identify a representative from their group. This doesn't necessarily mean that's the delegate. It's just a person from their campaign, a voting member of their campaign there that can sign that. Can I now have a representative from each viable preference group come sign the caucus reporting sheet? So next you'll report these results. So this is a piece that is so incredibly crucial. What you're going to do here, as soon as you have that little sheet filled out in its entirety, you're going to report the results to the Nevada State Democratic Party. You will have a hotline number that will be on your caucus guide. And then when asked, you will provide the secret passphrase that's found inside the folder where everything was. Then you are going to take a photo on your phone of the caucus reporting sheet and text that photo to the Nevada Dems. The number for that will also be in your caucus guide. The reason for this is that it is a backup to the backup. So we have our paper trail, and then we need a photo texted or emailed if you can't send it via text for some reason, to the Nevada Dems. You'll want to keep this photo on your phone, but you will not share this with anyone else. This is one of those big responsibilities you have in serving in the role as an officer of the party for that day. Okay, so it's an awesome responsibility. It's very important, but we are entrusting you. You are all great Democrats there to represent a process that is run by volunteers, and that is one of those big responsibilities that you have. And then you will immediately return your reporting sheet to your site lead. And then what you will do, this is just a visual representation of what we just talked about. You'll do it at the bottom here, and you will see where the signatures go. And you will also have the permanent chair's name, which ideally is you, with your contact information and your signature as well. Okay. And then after you have reported, again, after, you will tell everybody to hang out. The folks that want to leave and are not interested in running as a delegate can leave. But for anyone else who is interested in running as a delegate, they will need to hang around here. So you will say, we will now elect the delegates to send to the county convention. I'll start by explaining the role of a delegate to the county convention. Delegates to the county convention attend the all-day convention on Saturday, April 18th, 2020, and vote on a variety of party matters, including the county party platform, members to the County Central Committee, and electing the delegates to the state convention in Las Vegas on May 30th through 31st, 2020. If you wish to run as a national delegate to attend the Democratic National Committee in Milwaukee from July 13th through 16th, 2020, you must first be elected as a delegate to the county convention and from there to the state convention. So if you're interested in that, you will need to go through this process. And then you will instruct preference groups to take nominations. Each preference group should start by taking nominations for your delegate positions. You have two positions, county convention delegate and alternate county convention delegate. Remember, we have delegates and alternates. As a reminder, the number of delegates for each preference group is blank. So you will say for each campaign how many delegates they have according to the math you had just done. For the alternate, you can elect half as many alternates as has been awarded delegates. So if you have 4 delegates, you can award 2 alternates. Please note that each group should try to elect an equal number of men and women, and each candidate running for delegate or alternate will have up to 1 minute to make remarks. Again, you're going to break out the timer again. And then you're going to, once the delegates have been selected, hand out delegates and alternate certificate forms. And now that each viable candidate preference group has elected all of their allotted delegates and alternates, I will pass out delegates and alternate certificate forms to be filled out. Delegates and alternates should return their forms to me after the adjournment of the caucus. I will be submitting the final verified results back to the Nevada State Democratic Party after our caucus concludes. We will now move on to the submission of resolutions. So you'll collect any of those resolutions that folks might have picked up and filled out at the check-in table. And you'll say, if you picked up a resolution submission form at the check-in table, please bring it to me now. And then you will announce County Central Committee nomination sign-up. So if you are interested in becoming a member of the County Central Committee, there is a sign-up sheet at the check-in table. Please visit the check-in table to sign up once the caucus has adjourned. So it's just another reminder that folks can do that. And for Clark County only, they'll have to fill out the Clark County Precinct Captain form. So you'll find that in your precinct folder, and they'll follow the directions to complete the instructions on the form. And then you will collect all the forms. So you'll say, if you have any outstanding forms, bring them to me now. I would stand somewhere near the door to make sure that nobody walks away with one. Allow time for participants to bring up any other business or announcements they may have. And once that is over, you will adjourn the caucus. And you'll say, the caucus is now adjourned. Thank you all for participating. Okay, so after the process, or after the caucus closes for the precinct chairs, you're going to gather all the materials and package them according to the instructions in the precinct chair guide. You'll have all of that information as to what goes in what folders and where it ends up. And then you will return all of your materials to the site lead and return the space to the way you found it. And then check with the site lead to see if there's anything else that needs to be done, any other breakdown or cleanup that might need to happen. So please don't leave your fellow Democrats hanging. Everybody can use extra hands. For the site leads after the caucus, what they'll do is they'll collect those reporting sheets and any caucus materials. They will confirm that each precinct chair has called in or reported their results to the Nevada Dems via the reporting hotline. And they will have taken and checked that they have taken a photo of their caucus reporting sheet and texted that photo to the Nevada Dems. So you'll use one iPad to take a photo of each reporting sheet, and then you'll return all the reporting sheets to the appropriate envelope. So find one iPad and identify which one that is, and take, if you have 10 precincts at your location, you would have 10 photos, one of each reporting sheet. This is just the backup to the backup to the backup, right? To make sure we have a collection of those, and then just note which iPad it is. And then you're going to see the site cover sheet for instructions on returning materials to Nevada Dems. Now, this is so important. Please don't go grab a bite to eat. Please don't go say hi to a friend. Return these immediately because they are the paper trail. We need that information in order to verify results and to report those results. So the sooner you can do it, the absolute better. If for some reason something happens where you can't return it, call the hotline and somebody will come get it from you. Never stick them in the mail, as a reminder. Okay, so let's really quickly talk about safety at caucus sites. We want to make sure everybody feels comfortable and safe in the environment here. So if there is any emergency, of course, any threats of physical violence, a fire, anything that may arise like that, always call 911 first, of course, and then not until you are safe. We would like to know what happened, but make sure you're safe first, so then you'll give the Nevada Dems point of contact a call. Not the hotline, but your individual point of contact is the site lead. For other non-urgent situations, you all are leaders. You all are maintain a lot of responsibility on this day as a designated officer of the party for the day. So we're counting on your leadership at these sites. So try to troubleshoot any of these scenarios, find some conflict resolution. You don't have to call the state party with every issue. Try to find some resolution and then call, of course, if you can't find a resolution to that issue. And you will have that Nevada Dems point of contact, so the site lead should be the one to make that call. Okay, let's talk about the next stops on our train here. Of course, if you can, please early vote before February 18th. It makes it very hard for you to do all of the work that you need to do and maintain neutrality if you don't early vote. And as a reminder too, if you early vote and you are a volunteer on caucus day, you still are eligible to run for a delegate position if that's what you're interested in. So make a plan to early vote, think through it, look at the website again for those early vote locations, and make sure you get your friends and family out there to early vote too. And then we always need more help. Many hands make light work, right? So bring in some more folks, find some family and friends that can take this training, have them sign up, and encourage them to participate at the volunteer level if they can. We need all hands on deck, and you are all the best ambassadors of what we need to do. So please help us bring in some more folks. The more the merrier. And with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for the work that you are going to be doing, the work you've already done, for your dedication to the party and ensuring that this process runs smoothly. It can't happen without you. So we thank you for everything that you are doing to make that possible.